Hello everyone, my name is Sakari Isatar, a student of cross-cultural communications at American University. Today I'm going to be looking at the cross-cultural implications of online gaming through the specific example of the Morpeg massively multiplayer online role-playing game, Guild Wars 2. What is a Morpeg exactly? Well, a role-playing game is any game where as the character moves through the story, their actions actually influence how the story plays out. Say you kill one particular man, this action may come to haunt you later. A massively multiplayer online game simply means that thousands of players are playing the game at any one time, and their avatars are constantly running into each other and interacting. Because of this, Guild Wars is actually a very interesting game to look at from a cross-cultural analysis perspective, because the particular gameplay of Guild Wars 2 actually encourages cross-cultural interaction and cooperation more so than many other games in the genre.
Which is huge! You can't even understand how huge this is of a change from what we've been used to. Everyone gets their own loot and experience. They don't have to fight for it. They all contribute to the single quest or to taking down the boss.
Guild Wars 2 is a game all about cross-cultural adaptation. I'm going to be looking at 3 levels of cross-cultural analysis today, and the first level is in the online player base itself. Players who meet together to play an online game create a culture of their own. While sometimes they may form a diaspora, for example, American players create an American group which goes around following American customs and using English, more often than not, these players actually all work together inside a brand new culture unique to the game. This involves many different aspects, such as a shared literature, composed guides that one can buy in stores, and a vast body of knowledge stored on an online site. This also includes oral history. Players listen to characters speaking in-game about what's happening in the world of the game, speak to each other, form theories, make speculation, pass along knowledge.
And a theory that I think is quite interesting, it's got a lot of weight to it, and could mean a lot for the story of Guild Wars 2 as it continues on. It's a theory very much to do with the Elder Dragons, and it's a theory to do with the Sylvari, who are one of the newest and most mysterious races in Guild Wars 2.
There is a government to the game, as players create guilds to fight each other and help each other, and organize their own hierarchies, creating their own miniature part of this culture. And there's also trade, cooperative objectives, shared music, and new lingo, as players create acronyms for locations in games such as TA or LA, and speak of new concepts such as damage per second or Elder Dragons. All of these aspects combined together show that in fact online gaming does indeed have its own culture, as any area where any humans are pushed together is going to create. Before I talk about the second level of cross-cultural analysis, I'd like to discuss briefly the history of the world of Guild Wars 2. The world of Guild Wars 2 is called Tyria. It's a continent on a planet much like Earth. In the ancient past of Tyria, 5 noble species fought against 6 terrible and dangerous Elder Dragons. The species were victorious and the dragons were defeated. In the meantime, humans arrived on the continent of Tyria, spread across its grounds, in a sort of medieval European setting.
For many years before the game began, the humans that lived on Tyria had been warring with one another. There were 3 separate kingdoms on the continent, Ascalon, Kryta, and Or, each one often engaged in battle with the other 2. The latest war didn't have a good reason to start. Small fights between local guilds were becoming more frequent, and when blood was spilled in Ara, the holy city of the gods, the nation of Or took military action. Despite the fact these became wars between armies and nations, their original names stuck. These were the Guild Wars.
Humans, however, soon fell into factions, countries and guilds, and nearly destroyed each other, until they were united with other playable races against the emerging threat of the Elder Dragons. Let's talk about those five playable races from a cross-cultural perspective. In Guild Wars 2, there are 5 playable races. The humans, who follow a sort of Victorian British theme, the militaristic Char, the Norn, who follow a sort of Norse culture, the Asura, who act for all the world like college professors, and the druidic Sylvari, who look like fairly plant-like elves. These races can actually be analyzed using Hofstede's characteristics of countries: power distance, individual nature, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientations. Let's first take a look at a chart I've created for the Hofstede analysis of humans, or Cretans, in Guild Wars 2. The most prominent characteristic is actually power distance. Humans are loyal to their queen and to their country above all else. They respect decisions made by those above them, and they carry out orders convincingly. The next most obvious characteristic of humans is their uncertainty avoidance. This particular culture in Guild Wars 2 tries to minimize any uncertainty. These two characteristics are very evident when one looks at the following clip.
Welcome, fellow members of Destiny's Edge. We must speak of the threat of the Elder Dragons.
When I agreed to come, I didn't know you'd be inviting this Char.
I could say the same for you. Finally crawling back for forgiveness, Logan.
I've done nothing that needs to be forgiven.
Logan, Rytlock, enough of your squabbling. Kate, I doubt that we can unite again. Not after our last mistake.
The Norn's right. When heirs to Galkin makes mistakes, people die.
Is that what you think, Soja? That what happened was my fault?
Please, all of you, our time has come. We must help the Orders. We fought the Elder Dragons before.
And lost. Because someone couldn't keep up with us.
You have something to say it to my face.
I would if you weren't always running away. I should gut you and be done with it.
In the distant past, the human Logan, a member of a particular guild, thought it was essential to return to the side of his queen rather than continuing to work with his multicultural group. This caused some serious tensions with the others. The next race I'd like to examine is the Char, a race of humanoid felines represented in the previous clip by Rytlock. If we look at our chart for the Char, we see that their most prominent characteristic is masculinity. The Char are aggressive and warlike. They form together in different bands. There is very little power distance. Rather than to a specific hierarchy, the Char are loyal to their group, one of three legions, Blood, Iron, or Ash. Because they have such low power distance, Char like Rytlock are unable to understand how others could value something like their queen or country over the objectives of the game, the objectives of the war, the objectives of a struggle such as that referred to by Logan and Rytlock. And this tension creates various problems when Char and humans try to work together. The next race to examine is the giant-like Norn. If we look at the characteristics for the Norn, what is most immediately apparent is their individual nature. Rather than responding to a hierarchy or being entirely cooperative, the Norn believe in something called their legend. They work to expand the knowledge others have of them, to create a body of epic tales told about their personal deeds. This individual nature can lead them to rush into situations, and as we see, they have relatively low uncertainty avoidance compared to, for example, in contrast to the Norn, we have the tiny gnome-like Asura. Notice that there are not any particularly high traits for the Asura besides power distance. The Asura are a group of researchers, constantly looking for ways to further understand the magic and technology around them in the world. As such, their lowest characteristic is uncertainty avoidance, so they would do anything for greater knowledge. Finally, let's take a look at the chart for the Sylvari. The Sylvari score extremely low on power distance and masculinity, lower than any other race that we've discussed. The Sylvari are all about cooperation. They are born from seeds of a giant tree, which tells them to work together to accomplish many goals in the world. This actually plays into their highest characteristic, long-term orientation, in which the Sylvari outscore any other group. Sylvari are born with what they call a wild hunt, a sort of dream which tells them their very particular goal in the world, their raison d'être. Because of this, Sylvari spend their entire lives working towards the long term. They seek this goal above all else. They're willing to work with anyone else because of it. It is very interesting to observe what kinds of players in the real world choose which races. If we were to perform a comprehensive analysis of character choices per country, we may well find that certain characteristics lead to choosing races of a similar area. These distinctions are actually important because the choices that players in the real world make when choosing which species, which race they will play, actually may influence the type of interactions they have with other players. It's quite possible that their identification with certain races, for example, someone choosing Sylvari because they come from a very long-term orientated culture, may well influence which other players they get along with. And the cross-cultural implications of this research are actually immense.
Yogi's awesome.
Hey, come here. Everyone together.
Finally, the third level of cross-cultural analysis involved in this study of Guild Wars 2 speaks of how the story of the game unites these different races against this common threat of the Elder Dragons. Here we see 3 different orders, parallel to different organizations in the United States, for example. The Order of Whispers, a secretive agency perhaps like the CIA.
We'll leave the front line fighting to the others.
The Dermond Priory, a research-based organization similar to NASA.
Saves on manpower, you know, and we have achieved some marvelous advancements.
And the Vigil, a concrete objective-based group parallel to the United States Armed Forces.
Soldiers in there. The Vigil has a squad standing by. They're ready to sweep the area on your signal, Advocate. Just give the word.
Players are given a choice of which of these orders they would like, once again, quite based on their playstyle. And in fact, much of the story of Guild Wars 2 revolves around uniting these 3 very different orders and the 5 very different cultures into one sort of world culture, the homogeneous culture of Guild Wars 2 that we discussed at the beginning. Once this is accomplished, players can finally confront the threat of the Elder Dragons. Only through cross-cultural adaptation can the individual problems be surmounted, players inside and outside of the game be united, and the objectives of the game itself finally achieved. I hope that this podcast has been informative and that your curiosity is awakened. But remember, the lessons we discussed here don't just have to do with Guild Wars 2. They apply to online gaming throughout the gaming industry. As in fact, in all online games, the choices of players may vary greatly based on their background. And in fact, being able to work with players who choose very different types of characters and make very different choices is very crucial for achieving objectives within the game. Therefore, a knowledge of cross-cultural communications, or at least an understanding of how to work with cultures further than your own, are just as important in the world of online gaming and interactions as they are in the real world.
You've taken
Thank
down
you.
the dragon.